Welcome back to Off the Pitch, the podcast where we chat with individuals working within and shaping the game of soccer from off the pitch. Today's guest is Eric Beard, who at the time of recording was the creative director of EAFC, formerly known as being the video game FIFA. Eric gave us a full rundown of what his extensive career has looked like so far, having already done big campaigns for companies like Nike in the past, including leading their copy for the 2014 World Cup campaign, Risk It All. He gave us a big behind-the-scenes look at what that transition at EA looked like, going from branding the game as FIFA to EAFC, and he also let us know what he thinks is the biggest missed opportunity in soccer here in the United States right now. Now, when it comes to dream jobs, running the creative for the biggest video game on the planet has to be up there as a soccer fan. And I know that we were extremely excited when Eric agreed to come on the show. And so, with that being said, let's start this episode. Okay, so Eric, thank you once again for agreeing to join us and come on the show and talk about your journey. So David and I have obviously done a good bit of digging on yourself and your background and I think surface level knowledge of kind of the projects you've worked on and the roles you've been in. But for anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you mind just sharing who Eric Beard is and exactly what your career has looked like to date?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to this on this platform. I am Eric Beard. I have been a kind of recently creative director for EA Sports FC, previously EA Sports FIFA, for the past 3.5 years. Before that, loads of experience at various creative agencies, in-house at Nike as well, up in Portland or Beaverton. And generally like a multidisciplinary creative with a writing background, but now kind of expanded much more into film, into graphic design, art direction, brand identity work, and a few other things that I've been playing. And I started taking piano lessons a year ago, so starting to dig into music a little bit more. But yeah, happy to be here and to chat through kind of my experience.
Great. And then, as we were saying before we jumped on, I think you are a bit of a different guest than we've had so far. Everyone else we've been speaking to has really been front office or investor, president, owner side of things of clubs. But yours has been different. And those career journeys, people usually stick in one place for a long time or move to another team for another 10 years has been the trend. But looking at your career journey so far, you've been at a lot of different places and each one very, very impressive, especially the projects that we know you've worked on. I know you jumped on, you mentioned beforehand about like repetition and, wanting to be challenged with new things. And that's been a trend of going to different agencies. Do you mind just walking us through kind of what,
Absolutely,
role by role, company by company, your career's been before we really dive into things?
Sure. And I'll try not to bore any listeners. But yeah, I mean, like going back from the beginning, I was raised by two journalists and who very, early on instilled a very kind of global mindset. I was born in New York, then moved to San Juan, Puerto Rico when I was 2.5 years old, was in a Spanish speaking preschool, and had my first ever, football coach was like said El Tiene Potencial to my parents who were more baseball leaning folks, and they very quickly like got me down this path of just, okay, this is going to be a sport that we're invested in. From there, moved to South Florida. I actually like cross paths with the club that Josie Altidore played for before he started playing a few age groups up. From there moved to Boston, was playing at a very competitive club level and actually had the opportunity to go play in Italy when I was 16. And I played for, there was two clubs, Perugia, who kind of previously in years past had been kind of more of a legacy club in Serie A. as well as Ascoli, who were in Serie A at the time. They had a nice kind of partnership and program for bringing in kind of players from across the world, but especially kind of there was a pipeline from New York and the New England area. I was there, that was 2006, which if anyone's like, that rings a bell of any things that might strike some passion there. That's obviously when Italy won the World Cup, and just being there in that moment was really that passion piercing moment of, this is going to be more than just a sport for me. I ended up, wanting personally to stick and try to, be in Europe playing as long as possible. My parents were very traditional and wanted me to go to university, and then I ended up playing at Emory in Atlanta for a few years and had a great experience there. I did a few study abroads in Spain and Argentina, and kind of when I was in university, it kind of, not that I felt isolated in Atlanta and it wasn't as global of a city as some of these other places, but that passion for global football and the connection that I wanted to feel from it kind of sparked me starting my own kind of football club publication at the time. It was called A Football Report. It was like the glory days of the internet when everyone was super positive. No one was saying anything negative on Twitter. It was a different time. Everyone was super supportive. And so I kind of created this publication. It was based on the Tumblr platform, which again was like a very big throwback. But I started kind of doing that with my brother and a couple of friends. And then just through that community, a few things happened. People started reaching out from around the world who wanted to contribute to it, from Portugal, from London, from Ireland, from Middle East, from Asia. And it started kind of creating this web of people, giving their unique perspectives, doing good writing. That also became a conduit to me being invited to various Adidas, Nike, other MLS events, all sorts of kind of brand activations, which were kind of honestly like kind of a mystery to me, that world at that point, not understanding exactly how it worked. I kind of was tracking this very intimate football space, but an opportunity to actually, my first internship was with the kind of resurging New York Cosmos, when they were kind of revived and the brand was brought back to life by this guy, Paul Kemsley, who brought in a bunch of kind of hotshot advertising execs from agencies like Anomaly and Jordan Brand, big name people to work with some of the best. Like worked with Umbro, worked with great animation houses like Buck, and it just spent the summer in New York, sleeping on a friend's couch, getting as much experience as I could, being able to be on a fly on the wall, working with the likes of Eric Cantona and some other really special players, Carlos Alberto Torres, Pele, obviously. And so that was just a really special moment. And it felt like also just for MLS as well, like an interesting cultural challenge of like, they weren't being let into the league, but hold on, this like Umbro sponsored brand is suddenly the coolest kit in America. And so that was a really great experience. Went up, finished my degree, got an opportunity to work for a social agency called We Are Social, who do a lot of work currently with MLS and Adidas, and had a great experience there, just like learning global social media strategy. That was again like when things were still very white space and a lot of exploration happening, but learned a lot from a lot of really great people there. That led me to an opportunity to work with MLS, and it was kind of a YouTube accelerator program. It was this channel called Kick TV at the time, which is a big throwback. Got to work with Jimmy Conrad, a bunch of really fantastic people. Actually, one of my close friends, Chris Mackey, who actually I share a birthday with. He is now properly living in London and working for YouTube directly, and is just like another example of just kind of this web of just people who have the same passion as me. And so anyway, Kick TV was an amazing experience. Working with MLS in New York was an amazing experience. And kind of, I was still doing my own publication at the time. I actually transitioned it to a project called Where Is Football, which still exists to this day. It's like an Instagram you can check out. It's kind of that shared travel passion of kind of football storytelling. Personally, wherever I go, I still try to find a pickup game, see if I have mutual friends, and that's something that I feel like, you know, being decent at kicking a ball around has always helped me make friends everywhere I've lived. And like, it's a cliche, but it is very universal language. So yeah, that's always been a really nice connective thread. And then yeah, the kind of catalyst moment for my career was getting a cold call from a recruiter in for Nike, who essentially was saying, you know, there's an opportunity. It was the end of 2013. There's an opportunity to come work in Portland on Nike's World Cup campaign, which became the Risk Everything campaign. I didn't know anyone in Portland, had never visited. And they said it was a Wednesday when I got the call from this recruiter, and she essentially was like, yeah, so like you're, you know, on the short list, you know, people at this company have, you know, given value to your skills and your presence in the space, but we need to know by Friday. And so I had kind of 48 hours of like, you know, these were the Jogo Bonito ads. I used to study these moves in the cold of winter in New England. And yeah, just really being like, well, this is like a no-brainer. I have to go for it. Went for it. It ended up being like the best decision of my life. I was suddenly like around some of the best creatives in the world. I still feel like that campaign is a reference point, like is a really generational campaign that I think a lot of brands and even Nike themselves are still kind of chasing, that the essence of that spirit that came out of just like how fun those ads were, how well everything was pulled off. And yeah, I was you know, in my mid-20s and kind of put into this space as one, a more youthful representation of who Nike was trying to reach, but also a skillful writer and someone who could be a genuine like football authenticator of like, does it make sense to have, you know, like you know, Zlatan doing this in this commercial versus Pirlo or someone else, and being in a writer's room and being alongside, you know, the legacy agency of Wideman Kennedy, who have come up with so many of the great Nike spots. That it just was an incredible like trial by fire experience of like late nights trying to, you know, get over imposter syndrome as quickly as possible. And yeah, ultimately just like coming out of this whirlwind of a year with a whole new portfolio, a whole new kind of vision for what was possible in the creative realm. There was definitely kind of a, all right, that was incredible. Where do we go from here? Like, what's next? How do you beat that? For me, my time in Portland was also like I was living with roommates who were incredible designers. I had friends who were filmmakers. Portland, it still is, but especially at that time was such like a creative hub. It was like three of us living in a nice house with like a basement that we had as a studio. And we were paying like less than $2,000 a month between all of us. And it was just like really a special environment. We would, you know, have, you know, creative people over, throw parties, and just kind of, we ended up, I helped my friend start a gallery, which was called Fisk, which is actually I'm repping Fisk here,
Nice.
but it's now a like a leading design studio in the world. They do some of the best work with some of the best brands and artists. My close friend Bijan Barahimi is kind of I'll boost him up. He's a visionary designer, creative director. Has he I met him when he was at Nike. He designed like the Risk Everything typeface and was very influential in building a lot of really strong Nike design work, and now is working with loads of amazing musicians, brands, etc. And so he's still a very close, frequent collaborator of mine, as well as some other friends that I was able to be alongside in Portland. And then, yeah, from there, I started kind of working more directly with agencies. I started my own consulting business, which was called Common Goal. Did that for a few years. Was still doing loads of kind of freelance and consulting directly with Nike, but also had the opportunity to work, especially when I moved to Los Angeles from Portland, had the opportunity to work for brands like Red Bull and Snapchat, and Activision, which kind of got my foot into the door with gaming, which I had never really been a Call of Duty guy and definitely wouldn't describe myself that way. But there was an old Nike colleague who was kind of the client that wanted me on this account for an agency I was working with in Venice. And yeah, ended up kind of being a creative director on Activision and Call of Duty for a couple of years, which was kind of a great exercise in like doing creative work about something that I wasn't like so holistically passionate about. And it was also like a very yeah, just like it's still being in the entertainment space, working with loads of athletes, more on NBA and the musicians, like going to like Little Yachty's house and giving him a chain, or going even to Neymar's house and having him stream on the night when he decided to skip the Ballon d'Or ceremony because he knew he wasn't going to be honored in a best 11. So yeah, there were a lot of like surreal entertainment adjacent experiences, and I had the opportunity. I had a colleague of mine who's at EA. His name is Kevin Strunk. Reach out to me to help with a series of kind of North America focused FIFA 21 videos. And it was kind of storytelling based on essentially the campaign at the time was called Win as One, and it was about kind of these communal experiences that people have across the world with their clubs, with their communities, etc. I had a chance to tell some stories with leading kind of like Mexican American players and stories. So told a nice story kind of bridging the gap between Chicharito and Efrain Alvarez, and him growing up in East LA, idolizing Chicharito and now being able to be his teammate. We told a story with Sofia Huerta, who being kind of the only Mexican American representation on the U.S. women's national team, and how she was inspiring to this 13-year-old absolute baller named Melanie Barcenas, who now is playing for the San Diego Wave. And then we told a story with Venice Beach Football Club, with this young kid Hera, who actually got to play on the Estadio de Dogtown in Venice with Kylian Mbappe, who was in town for like a Nike tour. So yeah, that kind of bridged the door. People at EA saw that storytelling and kind of offered me a role to work within the walls at EA. And yeah, that's my latest experience. I can speak for droves about EA, but I'll kind of like pause, and hopefully that wasn't too much to dump on you guys, but that's the journey, in a nutshell.
No, that's great. Thank you for the detail. I think it paints a picture, and definitely probably answered some questions that David and I had about different steps of the journey. But I want to kind of go back to, as you were saying, like you were fighting this imposter syndrome of when you were now working on these massive, globally, tens, probably hundreds of millions of impressions when it comes to the work you were working on. What were some of the lessons that you had to quickly learn about going from, obviously MLS social media was big. That's a big role, but going from something like that to the risk everything campaign, where it's now like the face of Nike for the World Cup, which is obviously the biggest stage of football. What were some of the things you had to learn to go from where you were to then being part of that massive execution?
I think the stakes are the biggest thing that I've become aware of. That like the budgets were bigger, there was more investment, there was more accountability ultimately versus a more kind of startup mentality, more like let's try this out and see if it sticks. Things needing to really be challenged to kind of go through the blender of rounds and rounds of creative feedback to make sure that what we're shipping and what's going live is as strong as possible, that feels like doesn't have any weak points. And I think personally, the imposter syndrome came from realizing like, all right, you're being challenged as a creative person from every possible angle. That you and I definitely acutely became aware of areas that I could improve in, especially the likes of like graphic design, filmmaking, etc. Wanting to suddenly absorb as much of the technical details and kind of increase those skill sets as much as I could. And so it became like and a lot of that was like just being a sponge to the people with more experience around me. And I continue to do that to this day. Like I want to be surrounded by people who are smarter than me and who have knowledge that I don't have. But yeah, like that is really the crux of it. That even before and connected to the Risk Everything campaign, we launched two massive products. There was the Magista football boot, which to me is still one of my favorite boots of all time. The Mercurial was also kind of Mercurial Superfly at the time, which had this kind of like football revolution for boots, was essentially this kind of upper layer in the boot that kind of covered your ankle a bit more and gave you a bit more support, which like ended up leading to a lot of really exciting like developments in what had become kind of a step and repeat space. And like Mario Götze ended up scoring the winning goal wearing those boots, and that was a cool kind of full circle moment. But yeah, like there are millions and millions of dollars that are hedged against these moments, and I was not fully prepared for the pressure that would come for that, or the expectation, or some of the heat in those discussions. And that was also a privilege to be witness to it, because I don't know, I'm used to it now. It's not new at this point. Even with EA Sports FC, it was a very similar situation of like, there's a risk to this, to doing the rebrand. And so things were very calculated, had to be very precise. And so that experience with Nike kind of helped train me for those moments.
Yeah, I bet you've built calluses to the pressure
Mm-hmm.
that comes with the scale and the magnitude of what you're working on. One
Absolutely.
thing that I've always been interested in, as I said before we came on, like I've always been interested in brand and marketing as well. Um, One thing that I've always thought about, even when like seeing ads, and we'll get to it about playing like what was FIFA. Um, I've always been interested in just you see the end product as a consumer, and I think a lot of people just see the end product and it's like that's what they see and that's all they think about. But I've always had this interest in like how did that get to be? Like when it comes to like this massive ad campaign for the World Cup, we just see the ad. but we don't see any of the behind the scenes of how long ago this idea came, how long they've been working on it for, what kind of struggles and obstacles do you have to overcome. So speaking specifically to the 2014 World Cup campaign, how far out from the ad going live does the brainstorming or whatever ideation look like? And then what is that kind of timeline from we've come up with the idea or you start carving out the idea to it is now on the screens of hundreds of millions of people?
That's a great question. I would say, like, from the very genesis, it's for a World Cup campaign. It's probably about 18 months to 2 years before. Um, that's on more of like a brand strategy level. It's, we know this moment is coming. We know that we're going to need to make a massive moment of it. Like, who are our main athletes that are going to be heroed around it? Who are the deals that we need to, sign these athletes with? um, you know, uh, like, what are our products that we're creating that are going to be the focal point of this moment? Then like the next step is, like, what's our point of view on this moment? How do we differentiate ourselves and really make it something that we can own? And kind of from there, thinking of like, well, what are the creative and activation avenues, whether it's like events that we're doing in various cities around the world, whether it's doing a really aggressive, film campaign of various creative that scales to loads of social videos and reactives and stuff like that, that then leads to the actual like messaging and the actual kind of like motto and slogan surrounding the campaign. And then the actual like film and like the hero creative starts probably like a 9 months to a year out. And then, that kind of the ideation and the kind of creative process for script writing, for production realities, getting ready for production, that probably takes about 3 or 4 months. And then the remaining 5 to 6 months are you're in like straight production mode, building everything, trying to make it as sharp as possible, trying to get as many footballers to be in Barcelona in a studio on the same day as possible and coordinating the dates for that. Yeah, like it's in like honestly like a pretty arduous process to try to be that ambitious. It takes a lot of time, and that's the thing that I always say, that like there are certain things that you can't rush, and I think especially from the outside perspective of someone who may not understand that, or clients who may want that, they may not fully understand that, like, if you're trying to hit that caliber, planning probably should have started a year ago. That's not to say that like those things there can't be efficiencies and ways to be done more quickly, but I am a big believer in like planning things out from quite some time, and really just trying to be as sharp as possible on it. But then there are like there's a lot of like real time, and like especially now, like social trends, like things that can be kind of low lift wins that are reactive, whether it's tracks that are blowing up on TikTok, or things that just are really easy social trends to play off of. Those become really easy extensions to flow into like a larger brand platform, a larger campaign platform. But you need that overall campaign platform and that kind of like anchor point, or else everything just feels very disjointed. And yeah, like, so it's a pretty long timeline, but I would say especially like going from 2014 to 2024, the landscape has changed quite a bit, and the way people consume content has changed 100%. So it's not like you can look at that formula for risk everything and be like, this will be bulletproof in 2024, because so much has changed in the way, like especially with Gen Z, et cetera, the people you're trying to reach, how savvy they are and seeing through advertising BS and whatnot. So it's trying to be more honest and authentic with what you're making.
Yeah. So within that, then, because you're obviously completely right that the last decade for soccer has changed, both especially in the US and seeing out from here, but also you know social media consumption habits are incredibly different. So, what are some of those key ingredients then that differ from doing a campaign like that 10 years ago to you know Nike are presumably working maybe on their 2026 campaign already. So, what are some of those differences that you can see and know about that have to be factored in?
I think the biggest thing is kind of what I said, that because the audience that all these brands are trying to reach is that audience is so savvy that they're so used to being sold stuff that they understand marketing to a level that I don't think past generations really understood or challenged in the same way. That I think there's like a real like authenticity that needs to come through, that no one wants to be preached to. No one wants to be like forced a message down their throat. It has to come from a really real place. That's like not to say that you can't build a big campaign. I think there was a recent Adidas campaign where they launched the new Predator boot, and I think that was a like phenomenal exercise in making athletes like Jude Bellingham come off as really sincere and like still having a cinematic quality to it, but not feeling like you're needing to go off and create this separate reality that exists. Still very much these footballers being themselves. I think that's also a huge pivot, that footballers care much more about their image and are much more conscious. Like there's always, players like, Ronaldo and Messi, and have them having various teams that were always very protective and sensitive about their image. But now actually listening and understanding who these athletes are, how they want to be perceived. Like if you're telling a story with Trinity Rodman, it's not going to be the same as the story you're telling with Erling Haaland, and needing to take that into consideration. Otherwise, that will feel forced. Also, the sheer like channel sizes of these athletes are quite often bigger than the brands that than they're working with. So knowing how to scale and make it feel like they're part of the process that they're making, and sharing something that's authentic is hugely important. Same with like finding like the cultural voices and kind of like genuine fans. Like for us, for FC, it was like the insight of like guys like Daniel Kaluuya, the artist Dave, loads of other people, just grew up playing the game, grew up loving it. Like when we were in the studio doing a voiceover recording with Daniel Kaluuya, and like we surprised him being like, cool, can you do the like EA Sports it's in the game? Like he was so like solid and sharp, and then he just broke in that moment and was like, oh my God, like, wait, really? Are you going to use this? And we're like, yeah, we might use this. And yeah, like finding those like really genuine people, also working with like Jason Sudeikis and the Ted Lasso cast. Like Jason wanted the AFC Richmond team to be in FIFA because, like, I mean, one, he played FIFA, but also he was kind of trying to impress his kids. They didn't care about the show as much as they cared about the game. And so like finding those like genuine through lines where you're working with people who genuinely care, who will be invested, that won't just show up for an appearance, but actually like are in care about what's being made and how it's being shared out and presented. And again, like going back to the audience, like people know if it's real or fake. Like I think the filter I always put on any work is that I think you can see and very clearly if something was made and the people who made it enjoyed making it, or if they feel like it was, or if it was, forced through, if it was something that got, filtered down by layers of, brand guidelines and various considerations versus something that was just made from a point of passion and fun. I think and again, like the audience is savvy to that too.
Yeah, one of the things that you touched on, and I want to go back to the Risk Everything campaign a little bit, is now as so many younger people and also people kind of in our age group have grown up using social media, uh, how does it feel to have your work looked back on so fondly by everybody?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think like the nostalgia, like I try to as a creative, like I never want to like rest on laurels or past achievements or anything like that. But yeah, like I mean, even like nostalgia, especially like on platforms like TikTok and stuff like that, is so strong and so prevalent, and you'll still see like those spots being referenced as like glory days of growing up with that track and how that resonates, and stuff like that. So it's really cool because you still see it be in like the way a lot of advertising works is mood boards are formed, references are pulled, and you can still see things that are like, that's the formula they were pulling from this spot, this spot, and this spot, and they made the hybrid of it. And even like in some of like Nike's recent spots, like that's a formula that they took when I think for the, I think it was called the Football Verse. That was their 2022 World Cup campaign. And so it like lives on, and I think like really great work. And I do it too, where I grew up consuming every possible football ad under the sun. And there's still like sharp things, whether it's like something like the secret tournament or, Cantona's speeches and how authentic that Joga Bonito campaign was. Like there's a reason those things are reference points. Like they represent something that I think resonates with people on a bigger level. Like that's what actually made me want to get into working for Nike in the first place. But yeah, the nostalgia is crazy. Like even I think for FIFA, FC, like I think it do it like this is maybe a tangential point, but like I often like joke with the music team and the friends I've made at EA's music team, that like the reason I have decent taste in music is because of the FIFA soundtracks. And so like meeting the team and realizing there's this one woman, Rafaela Lima, who has curated the past 2 decades of all kind of EA Sports soundtracks, and like being able to become close with her and work with her on various soundtrack launches. We did for FIFA 23, we did kind of an ultimate FIFA soundtrack campaign, which was a nice kind of swan song and nostalgia hit around the World Cup. But like that was like the epitome of it, where you're realizing like everyone loves Blur, everyone loves Caesars, everyone loves John Newman, all these classic things, and like that, even that informed part of the creative. Like we used John Newman's "Love Me Again" in the FC24 reveal trailer, because it was so important for us to kind of like bridge the gap and be like, yeah, this is a new title, but so much of what you love about and what you loved about FIFA is going to be carrying on. All the players are still here. Like the same spirit is carrying on in a lot of the same ways. So yeah, like the past, like you have to consider it. You can't just be creating in like a complete bubble. Like sometimes you can, but like I reference past work all the time, and I'm proud of a lot of the work that I've been able to put to my name too.
And then one of the other things that we've kind of talked about a lot is that a lot of your work, past and now, has like a global impact. And I know that we spoke at length just now about the scope of the project that you worked on at Nike. The game that you work on now is basically the same kind of scope, the same global impact, but every single year. what, now that you've done it a few times, what is the most difficult part of putting together a project that has such a global impact and has to be kind of tailored to not just North America and the United States, but has to be tailored to each country and each region of the world?
I think the it's a lot of listening that like starts at the genesis of it. I think like you can't be involved in any product or any space without understanding like who cares about it the most. And I think like anything, kind of the people who care about something the most are often have the most, you know, constructive criticism or things that they want to see that they like very earnestly feel like will improve what they're spending a lot of their time and energy on. And so listening to that, listening to like kind of the symbiotic relationship that exists between FC and real football, and kind of like how that personally I feel like was hugely accelerated during COVID, and when fans weren't in stadiums and everyone kind of turned to the game. Yeah, like that listening is the most important thing. And I think like again, that's where sometimes like you have these massive agencies that or massive production companies make these big budget films, but they're not in the day in and day outs. They don't understand the deep nuances of what these cultures are all about. And so, yeah, for me, it's very natural. Like you know, have played FIFA since I was 9 years old, and you know, still have loads of friends from college who are playing FC and are kind of texting me all the time, who are, you know, want to jump on pro clubs or anything like that. So like, yeah, that's like the ground level work that needs to be done to like, who are we speaking to? Will they care about what we're making? Will they care about, um, and with it being an annual cycle, like it needs to feel different. Like you can call it the world's game over and over again. You can, you know, make people really tap into the love of football, and it's a really powerful force that like I don't want to diminish, like doing that in a really strong way year on year out, year in year out. But you have to like make it feel different, make it feel like it's changed substantially. And so like that's a huge part with every like FC and FIFA campaign. We around after we revealed the game with the reveal trailer, we did this series called Deep Dives, which is getting into each mode, like gameplay, presentation, ultimate team, really like, you know, about 10-minute long videos working with the developers, really showcasing exactly what's new, what's changing. And that's where that listening, and it kind of is like an ode to the community of like, we heard you, these are the things we're updating, these are the things that we're improving in the next year. And like that's so vital to like be able to do. Like it may not be like the sexiest work, it's not like the big TV spot, but like that shows that this like core passionate community is being listened to. And then when you get that core community on board, like those are your biggest sellers. Like if they're the ones who really rate your game and say it's good, then that's just going to bubble out and reverberate in loads of ways. But if you don't get them on board and you're just speaking to this mass audience and the people, there's no one who's really engaged at the core, then it's not going to really resonate. It's not going to be a success. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but yeah, that's kind of how I would approach it, or how I've been approaching it.
Having to address the problems of, and not the problems, but having to address the major community that you're trying to advertise to and speak to is one of the things I don't think that a lot of people consider when they see a lot of the marketing campaigns. And I think that like what you were saying earlier, it helps a lot of things come across as really genuine.
Yeah, I think another thing too is that like regional storytelling is hugely important. And I think, you know, like you only have one global Instagram account and whatnot, so not everything can live in those ways. But that's again where like if we're doing a story, introducing Mia Hamm to the game, working with her, the U.S. Women's National Team, finding the avenues. I think like any global football narrative, it's often Europe dominated and focused on the biggest, most eye-catching teams. But for me, it's been really important to ensure that, the South American stories are being told, that we're able to ensure that there's, really rich like Asian storytelling, especially with working a lot with Hyunmin Son and the Korea team, that like, for Sam Kerr being the face of the Women's World Cup this past year in Australia and New Zealand, making sure that we're properly embracing her role as kind of a champion of Australia and kind of the face of that nation and pride of that nation. And so it's like this nice balance of like, what's a regional story, what's a global story, how do these things work together? And not, some of these regional stories don't have nearly like the budgets or the resources as some of the bigger global beats, but they can also just be like as important as and as impactful. So it's like finding space to weave those in and be smart about that.
I want to dive a bit more into the rebrand, because obviously, as you mentioned, you grew up playing it. David and I, of course, grew up playing it. I had older brothers that before I could play, I was watching them play. So like FIFA was just such a massive part of I think all three of our lives, but like most football fans' lives. And obviously, it has this multi-decade legacy, and then suddenly it's changing. So, what did that timeline look like from inside the company of finding out that it's no longer going to be called FIFA, that license, that whole arrangement is done, and it now needs to be something else? What are like those initial conversations of how to move forward and get something new out?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to exactly when that timeline started. I wasn't, in Switzerland or in some of these meetings that may have taken place. But I think there were, once it became something that, because there was also a period where, this might happen, it might not happen. This is something we want to be prepared for. That, starting to bubble up about like 2 years before the launch of FC. And that began with, what would it even look like, and reflecting on, oh wait, actually for the past 30 years, EA has not just built a relationship with FIFA org, it's been with all these player associations, it's been with all these leagues, it's been with all these clubs, and these are real strengths to double down on. That actually, yeah, the FIFA World Cup may not be able to be in the game as a playable game mode, but how important is that to the average player? How much does that matter for something that happens 1 month every 4 years versus a game that is, day in, day out what people are playing? And so a lot of these kind of like, again, it wasn't involved in like the full like, cost benefit analysis and everything that went into that. But obviously it became, like, we have a platform, we have the engine, we have this amazing development team that has been building this game that wants to be able to do things better. And then what kind of that a lot of other like silver linings started to form of like, well, there were some sponsors that we couldn't work with because, we had to follow suit of who FIFA often had relationships with. So whereas, working on bigger, Nike or Puma campaigns couldn't have been done in the past because of relationships with Adidas. Now things like that are on the table. Now you can work with Pepsi instead of Coke. Now you can do stuff like that. And it started being like, okay, well, hold on, like, what are the platforms here? We can now work with Apple and Beats by Dre. We can, and that, I think, from a a marketing perspective started to bring a lot of opportunities. Like, well, if we build a really strong brand that can stand alongside these other brands that we aspire to work with, what does that look like? What does that look like? In if all goes well in year one, after 3 or 4 years, and especially with again, like Gen Z habits and how quick tech moves, like it doesn't take 20 years to build a brand anymore. And so working with like the best in class partners and building brand identity and doing the research, and ultimately like coming with this very simple but I think effective solution of using the triangle as the symbol over your head and in every match as kind of an inherent, and also triangles being such an important part of modern football, it being such a clean solution for us to build an identity off of. So yeah, it became like I think the work probably really ramped up about a year and a half before launch, but there was kind of that previous window of like, oh, let's start to think about this. This could be something that could be a path for us to go down. And again, I wasn't in all those conversations, but it was something that was on our periphery of like, this could be interesting. Like, we don't know the details yet. We don't know, what our product could even look like, but it's something that, and I think personally as a creative, like instead of working on FIFA 21, FIFA 22, 23, 24, 25, having the opportunity to hold on, we're going to do a big pivot and start a new chapter. Like that just immediately became a lot more interesting to me, to be like, hold on, what can we build here? Like that is better, or different than what existed in the past.
Yeah. And I think it definitely is. Like I think when the news came out that the rebrand was happening, and obviously like there were rumors online before it was even fully confirmed, or a name was out there or a logo was out there. I think a lot of people, and probably myself included, because there was a window where I didn't really play FIFA, like 23, 24, like leaving college, starting work, and like, okay,
Yeah.
it's like, we'll put FIFA to the side for a bit. But then I've played FC 24, and obviously I've seen all of the ad campaigns and just been around it, with the algorithms pushing the ads to me. So I've seen a lot of the creative, but then playing the game, it actually does feel different. Like it looks and feels like a different experience with the brand. And I think before, of course, there is some competitors, of the soccer video game scene, but like realistically, it was FIFA. FIFA was the game. But FIFA just kind of felt like everyone knows it's made by EA, but it just felt like the soccer video game. But
Yeah.
now it really feels like the way Call of Duty is not, the shooting video game. It is Call of Duty as its own brand, as its own thing. I think FC 24 has definitely carved this feeling from a consumer side of like, this is an EA brand thing. It's not just soccer video game. So I know you touched on things like crafting the triangle. How does even that idea come about, and what are some of the other ideas that get put on the chopping board? That like when the triangle came, it was like, okay, this is the one. Like whatever ideas were there, and how do you really narrow down on like, this is what we're going with?
Honestly, it was a strong favorite. Like it kind of was an early idea and became the idea to beat. And like there were loads of brand exercises, with some being more just less symbolic marks, more just clean type, clean identity work. But there was a really strong desire from the brand team to have like a real symbol that represented the brand. And even now, like if you see the brand fully built out, there's the FC triangle, but then on like the FC 24 cover, it is just nice EA Sports FC 24. And so the brand exists on a few different levels. But yeah, like I'm trying to think of like any notable explorations. It was honestly like a pretty smooth process of like, I mean, we feel like this is the one. And it also just felt very ownable. Um, in like that triangle hadn't been used in very many spaces, and that other shapes, and especially like recent like circles and stuff like that being so common in football crests, like they were, everything was explored, but nothing felt as unique as that.
Yeah, that's that's cool. That's cool. Another thing that I've always, again, from like the visual branding side of just like being interested. I think Jogo Benito, those ads were like what sparked like this love for me growing up. Again,
Yeah.
my older brothers were watching it. They were trying, we had the white and gold Nike Ronaldinho skill ball and everything. So like I grew up just in love with that era of Nike advertising. But something that I've always been curious about is the covers of all the FIFAs, and obviously now FC 24, and about who decides who gets to be on the cover, and what does that decision like stem from? And more so, I guess, is that a data driven decision year to year based on like performance, or that person's brand, or is it just feels right that this player should be on the cover next year?
Yeah, I would say it's not a precise science. Like some come down to, you know, strong relationships that you have with that our athlete marketing team has with players that um or don't have, where certain players just unfortunately are not on the table because they're not interested or not working as smoothly. And then there are others where yeah, they've had a record breaking year, and they present themselves as like, who else would it be? But there have been a lot of like opportunities for deviation, and like even in the past year, or past couple of years, I would say, before this past year with Erling Haaland being on the cover, Kylian Mbappe had been on the cover for the past couple FIFAs, and there definitely was a consideration of like from the community, especially being like, ah, him again. Like, not that he's not good, not that he's not worthy of being on a cover, but like not as exciting as like changing it up maybe. And so that informed a decision. We're like, okay, well, Killian's our guy still, but what if we have a woman on the cover as well, especially if we're introducing women's club football? What if we bring Sam Kerr to the fold, position her on equal standing with someone like Killian, and found a nice way to create headlines that way, to make it feel like a really massive story, for bringing women's football to the forefront, while also, Killian's still there, he's still our guy, but it feels different than in years past, and just having him on his own in the third straight year. And then yeah, for FC 24 is kind of a similar story. Is Killian's great, but people want something new, and especially if a brand is taking a new direction, new and what's exciting and what's up and coming feels like the right fit. And Erling, was that guy last season. He broke every record, won the treble. Like he rocked up to our C24 event wearing, Dolce and Gabbana pajamas, and wearing bright green, and really embodied this like, I'm here with a different energy. So like, yeah, I think it depends, and like I can't speak too much on like how decisions were made before I joined. Um, but yeah, like performance on pitch performance is such a huge factor. Is definitely the biggest factor. Um, but it's also like, yeah, to some degree, there are different levels of ambassadors on that. As EA athletes, you do have the cover star, but then there are various regional influencers and athletes. So like the FC Mobile game, the face of that was this past year was Vinicius Jr. And a big part of that is like, okay, well, like we want more people in Brazil playing our game, playing the mobile game. Let's target their, their FIFA on or FC Online, which is a product in Asia. Hyunmin Son being more prominent in that space. So there are definitely like decisions that are made on different levels where you have various players and athletes having different roles outside of just the cover star too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I actually hadn't thought about. I hadn't actually even noticed, that the mobile game had a different player, but it totally makes obviously complete strategic sense. Well, I know we're coming up on time, but one thing we've been doing with guests is finishing off with just a few quick fire, kind of shorter answer questions that will just get you thinking on your feet before we finish up. So
Great.
the first one of that for you is, of course, nothing other than who is your go-to team in FC24?
I have always been a big like Barcelona guy. That's always been my go-to. Although for FC24, I've been just like a Messi menace, and I like to just go for Argentina. And yeah, like there's like a controlled sprint feature that is pretty popular in FC24, and I also like who knows how long Messi's going to be around, so I want to play with him as much as possible.
Yeah, play with the current card before it becomes a Legends card.
Exactly.
All right, and then the next one, the kind of channel your entrepreneurial side. What is, from everything that you're seeing, because you're in the game so deeply, what is one business opportunity in the soccer industry, whether it's globally or in the US, that if you were to start a business right now, it would be that?
I think, and maybe this is like more for like a North American crowd, but I do think that like the Spanish speaking market, especially in the United States, is really continues to be underdeveloped. And I think like the creators, the culture surrounding this, like even a lot of the content that you see on TikTok that's just like the best content that's out there comes from the Spanish market. And I think like, yeah, especially with the World Cup approaching, there being such a massive opportunity to like have a modern, yeah, whether it's like a company or like social strategy, or you just like finding ways to scale, like ensuring that you're capturing that Spanish speaking like audience is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the World Cup is. We've spoken about it to all of the guests, really, what the next half decade looks like in the immediate future of everything happening, but then kind of the legacy that comes after that that's just going to propel the game even further. So yeah, you're definitely nailing it with the Spanish speaking side. And the last one, final question, and this can be personally or professionally. What is the one thing that you're most looking forward to in the remainder of 2024?
Um, I mean, I think this summer is going to be pretty special. Like having two massive tournaments that I think um, kind of represent like the evolution of kind of modern football with Copa America and the Euros. I think both I feel like are going to hit this kind of World Cup fever kind of peak where I don't think I distinctly remember it because of 2006 and my experience in Italy, but how good a tournament hosted by Germany is, as well as, like, having Argentina and Brazil on US soil, and that being kind of a ramp up moment for Confederations Cup and World Cup. I just think you can't underestimate how cool football culture is going to become this summer. And you even see it with like so many fashion brands, with everyone trying to get a slice of the pie. Like I just everyone wearing it out, in modern, just streetwear and whatnot. I think like it still hasn't hit where it's going to this summer. And I just think like, speaking of like nostalgia, like I think people are going to look back on this summer as like where a lot of trends exploded, a lot of different behaviors exploded, and this summer is going to be looked back on as like, wow, a lot changed in the summer of 2024.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely the whole next 5 years is exciting. Definitely being in the States, but this summer is definitely exciting to have the Euros back. Obviously, I am European. I'm from Ireland, so I have a special relationship with the Euros, and I watched from Northern Ireland, and I watched Northern Ireland win in the Euros in 2016. So that was the best day of my life. So hopefully a lot of people can replicate that feeling this summer as fans. But yeah, Eric, I guess that's all from us. Yeah, it's been great to have you. Thank you again for making some time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was honestly so cool. Thanks for watching this episode of Off the Pitch. Don't forget to drop a follow or subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening from. That helps us bring stories like these to your ears each and every week. And if you have a minute, leave a review as well, as that helps us grow the Off the Pitch community and bring even more exciting guests on. See you in the next one.